This is KM Wyland, and you're listening to the 48th episode of the Wordplay Podcast. I'm powering ahead through my research this week. I had the vague goal of finishing research and starting to write The Deepest Breath by sometime this spring or summer. As the days begin to warm and the trees and the grass starts to green, I'm realizing that deadline is fast approaching. I'm just finishing up the last of my World War I resources and turning to my pile of Africa books. My Africa research shouldn't take me anywhere near as long as the depths of the war, so I'm hoping to finish in another month or so. Fingers crossed, because this girl is definitely ready to start writing again. In other news, I've had the pleasure of hearing that wordplay was mentioned on the airwaves. Writer and radio host River Jordan discovered me via Twitter and talked about the blog on her program, The Place to Hang Out on the Radio. You can visit her website and find information about her program at riverjordan.us/radio. Take full advantage of your premise. The latest post in the video series on my blog explains how science fiction master Orson Scott Card's book Enchanted gives us a prime example of using up every delicious drop of premise potential. You can watch the video on my blog at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. Meanwhile, enjoy this week's podcast. When your story doesn't turn out like you planned. How many times have you come up with a brilliant idea? A story so dazzling, a character so real, a snippet of dialogue so scintillating that it knocks you breathless, only to have it fail to live up to your vision when you start putting it on paper? If you're like me, then the answer is every single time. The hard, cold truth is that the stories we put on paper, no matter how good we are at writing them, rarely if ever live up to the stories in our heads. Best-selling young adult author Gail Carson Levine acknowledged, "Ideas are ideas, and words on paper are words on paper. They're not the same thing no matter how much we try to convince ourselves." Stories on the page have a mind of their own. As soon as we start forming our characters into letters and words, we're cementing them into reality. They're no longer the airy, changeable, ethereal creatures that wisp about in our minds, flashing in and out of our lives in snapshots of color and dialogue. They've solidified, and with that solidifying comes both a loss and a gain. We lose the lucent perfection in exchange for a satisfying, if flawed, substantiality. In his manual, Fiction Writer's Workshop, acclaimed short story writer Josip Novakovic explains, "The plot outline is like a game plan in basketball or football. It can look good on a chart, but once the ball flies it does not suffice. The plan is not sacred. It shifts depending on the position of the players on the field and on the flight of the ball in the wind." Chances are good that our stories will never quite live up to our expectations. But the challenge of bridging the chasm between idealized concept and finished product is one of the joys of the craft. In her insightful free ebook, Nail Your Novel, book doctor Roz Morris advises that the reason first drafts seem to be so difficult is that there's a big gap between expectations and reality. The version in our heads is warm, twinkling, and faultless, but when we try to write it, it doesn't come out that way. This is because, for most mortals, getting it all right in this stage is impossible. In a first draft, we feel we're writing rubbish, and we probably are. But, as award-winning radio personality Ira Glass points out, the very fact that we always expect our work to be better is a sign of our good taste. If we can see the flaws in our stories, if we can identify where they fall short, we have the opportunity to make the next story that much better. As time passes and we continue to gain experience and grow as writers, we will inevitably begin to shorten the gap between the perfection of our imaginations and the flaws of our execution. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, visit me on the web at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com, and be sure to listen again next week.